Speaking of a list, ESPN had another list for their top 10 running backs for 2023. Um, go for this really quick. Blake Corum from Michigan, number one. Rashawn Jenkins, Ole Miss, number two. Raheem Sanders, Arkansas, number three. Nick Singleton, Penn State, number four. Donovan Edwards, Michigan, number five. Braylon Allen, Wisconsin, number six. Bucky Irvin, Oregon, number seven. Will Shipley, Clemson, number eight. Trey Benson, Florida State, number nine. And then finally, Frank Gore Jr. From Southern Miss, number 10. One thing I noticed, there's not a lot of star power in running backs this year. It's not I would say, running back heavy 2023 season, it appears. These are some good names, but nobody jumps out at me as like, oh, they're going to take over the game, take over the season. But let's start first. You guys, any initial impressions on the list? So, sorry, you, Jordan. Anything that stick out to you on this list?
We were talking about it before. We didn't even know who Bucky Irving was when it popped up.
Sorry, Bucky. I just haven't heard your name, man. You know, you're West Coast.
But the biggest thing that points out to me is Michigan has two in the top five. And I keep seeing everywhere Michigan has.
Should they though?
I think Michigan has a stacked running back room this year, and I think that's going to be their really.
And they don't play anybody, so they have a pretty.
They have a really big. That's going to be their bread and butter this year. Is that running
offensive line, running back? They're loaded in those areas. So
that's the two things that point out to me. I think the list. It's so hard to look at running backs because lately, there's not a lot of great running backs we haven't seen. I mean, if we go back, you have Saquon Barkley, watching him and, that. But this, last year and this year, the running backs have kind of went downhill. It's not as a sawed-off position as, we see. I mean, we talked about the NFL draft and, like, this year the draft, there wasn't really a lot of great running backs.
Yeah.
So, but just the two Michigan running backs, to me, that's the biggest thing that, catches my eye.
After you, Jess, anything sticking out to you?
There's no Trayvon Henderson on this list. I know he broke his foot last year, but he's still being projected obviously it's way too early to be talking 2024 NFL draft, but on all these lists, who's going to be the top running backs next year, that typically means that people expect them to do well in the 2023-2024 college football season. He's on like every top list. He's pretty high up there. I mean, I don't think anyone is upset with Blake Corum, number one. Braylon Allen, I think, should be a little higher. I definitely have him over Donovan Edwards because I think, while both him and Corum are great, I think Corum is going to be the primary guy for Michigan, unless they're really going to be splitting things borderline even.
Yeah.
Raheem Sanders, I think I like where he is. But yeah, no, I'm just surprised that there's no, optimism for Trayvon Henderson, in his return. And I guess this guy doesn't think too much of it. I don't know. But, he averaged last year, just even in the games he played, he had 5.3 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns, 571 yards, and he missed 5 games. So he's probably going to, with how dominant these, top end offenses are, I wouldn't have been surprised if he got back over 1,000, 10 plus touchdowns, but I mean, I don't have too much of a issue with the list.
I think the biggest thing for me is a lot of these are just not household names, so it's a little like you don't have a Georgia running back, you don't have an Alabama running back, which is usually on this list. It's just weird. I will say Braylon Allen, I wasn't as impressed with him last year. I think like he took a step back. I wonder how that new offense will either help or hurt him. So that's something I want to watch for this year. Will Shipley, he's a great player, but he struggled with behind that offensive line because they were just not great for Clemson last year. I don't know if they did enough to fix that offensive line issues. Maybe they'll have quicker offensive play calling, so it'll kind of help that. But I feel like that could be an issue for him. Some of these I think Nick Singleton in Penn State will have a good season. He he was the number one running back in his recruiting class, had a good freshman season. I think he'll continue that. To your point on Blake Corum, I think he'll continue to lead a load, and Donovan Edwards will continue to back him up and do some good things there. Again, a Bucky Irvin, he had like we'll call it about 1,000 yards last year. I just really to hear his name. So we'll see if they have some more prominent games where he shows up, then that's something to watch for. I, I did mention him beforehand. I'm not trying to show my Notre Dame homerism a little bit, but Audric Estime had close to 1,000 yards last year, and that's when he was splitting the carries with Logan Diggs. And Logan Diggs had close to 1,000 yards as well. And you take Logan Diggs, who's now the starting running back at LSU. I think Audric Estime will just kind of, especially in this offense where they have Sam Hartman running. I mean, passing the ball where you can't stack against the run, I think he's going to have a really successful year, and he'll be in this top 10 before the end of the year is over. Anybody missing? I'm trying to think of like a running back that comes to mind, but is there any running backs that you guys can think of that you think should be on this list that we haven't talked about or seen yet?
I mean, as Jordan said, I don't think there's going to be a Bijan, a Saquon, a McCaffrey, a Fournette, or anything in this upcoming year, this upcoming draft. I don't think we're going to be getting anyone quite like that. So I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. I think, they got the big names, some names we hadn't heard before. But, as sad as it is to say, I think Jordan mentioned it earlier, the value of the running back position has depleted over the years, and it's just, it kind of is one of those. I think a lot of guys are going to be made by their offensive line. I think we're going to have like that guy this year. So that's just my thoughts on it.
Yep. Some I think could Gavin Sawchuk from Oklahoma. I feel like he could potentially. He was a really good running back in high school. Last year was his freshman year. He had a little bit of run, but I feel like he will have more opportunities this year. So I could see him potentially doing something there. I think what's his name from Tulane? I think Clayton Johnson, something like that from Tulane. I think they had a really good offense last year. I think he's somebody I think can pick up the void from Tajay Spears, who left to the NFL. So I think he can do some things. And then I'm trying to think of and then Trevor Etienne, if you remember his brother, obviously with Clemson. He's at Florida now, his brother, and I think he has an opportunity to do some things. He had a pretty good freshman year there as well. So that's some other folks that have not been mentioned. I think might have to be able to take a step up. On top of that, I think from Alabama, I'm trying to think of the true freshman running back we talked about a couple weeks ago. Totally lost his now, but I think Nick Saban has been talking him up every chance he gets, so he might join us on the scene as well. So those are our running backs there for this upcoming season. So let's wrap it up with this quick, just a couple quick news items here.